If
Recording in progress.
that's a thing. If you haven't filled out attendance so far, you could do that for us. It helps us pay for pizza and pays for other food at other meetings. So today we're doing a dual workshop. I'm going to talk about, so if you didn't get an internship, what you should be doing. And after Jonas is going to be talking about what you should be doing at your internship. By the raise of hands, how many of you guys have an internship for the summer? Okay, that's pretty much what I expected. Begin. Okay, so this is Jeremy. He's a sophomore CS major. He has a 3.72 GPA. He has some school projects. He's involved with some campus clubs. Did a hackathon last spring, but he's applied to 400 jobs. He has reason to believe jobs aren't real, and he's given up hope on getting an internship. Probably moving back in with his parents, and is giving up on all of this. If you can relate to this, then we can help. Don't give up. That's the biggest message you can have. Don't give up. First off, this application season still isn't even done. UF ends earlier than most colleges. There are jobs that may have you only working half the summer. Another thing is research, always hiring, if that interests you. There's a ton of small job boards that may just want you to update their website, dashboard, or database that they may pay you $5K just to work on. I know a couple of previous officers, Michael, got an internship just reaching out to a company and saying, hey, why don't I fix this for you? And they were like, oh yeah, that's been broken for a really long time. So you still have some time. There's job boards posting everywhere. Bits and Bytes UF always has little posts where it's like, oh, can somebody go fix this? Hire Warrington. It'll send you emails about, and those don't even have to be CS related. They can be businesses. And there's a ton of other job boards out there. However, when it does finally come time for this end of this internship schedule, early June is when the next cycle begins. So you got to be ready. So for next year, you got to have your resume ready, organize your applications, be ready with professional development, have projects ready. And if not, take classes or keep yourself busy over the next summer. So for first thing, we're going to talk about resumes. You got to update it and keep it simple. Like if your resume is old, if you haven't updated it since fall because you gave up on applying, you got to go back in there. You got to add whatever projects you've done, anything you've done. I'm sure you've done something. Make sure it's easy to read, not only for you, for the recruiter, but also for you, so it's easier to update in the future. Keep things that are relevant, action word, buzzwords, or numbers. So for example, you want an action word like developed, integrated, figure it out. And then you want a buzzword that is that of what you used on that project. There's some examples. And then another thing that people recommend is numbers. You can obviously see that the number 100,000 points out a lot more than spelling the entire thing out. That shines, especially on a resume where there's a ton of bullet points and a ton of things to read. So for example, integrated Google API into company dashboard to track 25 active tickets. Depending on the entry, you want 2 to 5 bullet points. You could possibly do more if you're really proud of it or you did a lot, but don't do too much. You want to keep it organized. You want to categorize information. You don't want everything to be scatterbrained. Easier for you, easier for the recruiter. The digital formatting, I used Word and Doc for a really long time. Then I switched over to LaTeX. LaTeX is amazing. Learn it. It's useful, not just in resumes, but any project or any research paper in the future. Publisher, same thing. LaTeX, it's the nice thing about it, especially with Doc or I guess with all these things, you want to be able to switch things out. So for example, like if I'm applying to one job and I want to have, I want to shine, it's a back-end job. You may want to take off your front-end website project and put on like a back-end project instead. If it's in sections, it's much easier for you to take it out and switch it in. It just makes it easier. You may have different resumes for different jobs and it makes it easier for you. And then another thing is making sure it parses correctly. These companies have parsers when you apply to their job and it just fills out the entire thing for you. Mine for a long time wouldn't parse, so I gave up and I made one text doc and literally just uploaded that for parsing. And then so when they would actually look at it, I would take that down and upload a different document later on. It just made my life easier because I was having to go back and switch every single thing because it was reading like UF as my first experience or whatever. Here are some easy resume points that every person can have on your resume. Relevant coursework, you can literally have it above. GPA, you want to put that on if it's above a 3.0. Your intro to SWE project, if you're comp sci, you probably took it. Don't only put skills if you don't have enough projects or experience. If you're probably a freshman or sophomore, you might still be in that category. Another thing you can do is you can find buzzwords on the job description and just say, oh, I'm actually good at that. Something like proficient in Microsoft Office shows up all the time on these as these buzzwords that just help you get through the parsing. Another one is Scrum or unit testing. You've done unit testing if you've taken any intro level programming class. And as soon as I put that on, every single interview, I either got asked about Scrum or unit testings when you put it on your resume. Another one that if you have the money, certifications are usually $100 or $150. Sometimes they're free, and sometimes employers will even pay for it for you because they want you to have it. Another thing is projects. You use school projects. School projects are good. The only thing is yes.
Yeah, I just want to say about the non-physical section. I personally kind of disagree on that because one, I actually have the skill sections like the very first thing on my resume. Partly that was because career connection centers was a good idea. Also, when recruiters are going to resumes, they're always going to be screened for someone. So I think having relevant skills, especially if you're applying for a job where they want a specific stack and you have that stack on the resume, making it easy to find and easy to see there, I think is really important. So this is kind of pointing out like a difference.
Yeah, it's definitely like some people have it and some people don't. Some people like it, some people don't. You can very easily, that's kind of why I said earlier, like being able to switch it out, it's kind of useful and knowing what you want. Another thing with going to projects now, you can use school projects, but for example, for the career fair, when they see Minesweeper or Pac-Man or Sudoku for the 100th time, they don't want to see that. So you want to make sure that they're unique when they're at the career fair or something like that. And you don't have to tell them their school projects. If they ask, obviously, and you're okay to put also incomplete projects. You can have a GitHub link and then make it very easy for people to interact with these projects. Ooh. Or gore. It's all right. Okay. So another thing is incomplete projects. I know Jonas can attest to this. Didn't you have an incomplete project on your resume? And the recruiters said that they went back and they checked it after and they were playing it.
I told them it was going to be done in like 3 weeks and then they put the URL.
Exactly. See, they look at these things, especially if they care. With projects, make sure you highlight what you learned. It's important that they know that you grew and you learned something from this project. They can be very small things. Hackathons are an example, done very quickly. You want to try and solve bigger problems. You can be like, oh, like parking on campus. There's very simple app to track. These are just some simple examples. App to track parking availability, web dashboard to track personal finances. Those are all issues most people have, like the perfect workout, different things like that. These are all little projects. You could literally ask ChatGPT and it'll spit out thousands of them. This is an example of what not to do on a resume. Famous slide. There's a lot of things wrong with this. There's so much going on. Actually, can anybody tell me what's wrong with this resume on the left? Yes. Yeah, you got anyone else? No, that's a big one too. Yeah, it's basically everything's everywhere. There is so much going on. NAT's system isn't going to know what to do with this. It's just a lot. Another one is this one on the right. This is probably what the average CS student looked like when they first got to college. One job, McDonald's, but you have to start somewhere. It's very easy to add on to this and add other sections. So for example, this is a different idea of what to do. You have your most recent sections at top. You want to have different 3 or 4 sections. I have 3 sections. I know the 4th section would have been skills. You want to have a link to your project so that they can go check. And then at the top, I'd have keywords for projects. Keep it simple, make sure it's organized, make sure it's easy. This is just a classic LaTeX example. Okay. Yeah.
So, question about this. You mentioned earlier that you have a separate resume just for parsing.
I don't anymore. I used to do that though. Because it would parse incorrectly when I was originally using Google Doc, it would parse incorrectly. And I gave up. And I just said I switched to LaTeX, but I had a doc for that.
I was wondering if it would be wise to have like a text document that has absolutely no format. Like it's like you can tell it plain text if you wanted to.
Mhm.
And just use that for scan.
I definitely think so. If like even the one I have now scans incorrectly sometimes. I think a big thing is that if it makes it easier on your life, then do it, especially when you're applying to applications and you're filling out hundreds of them. But yeah, if you literally just have like, I don't actually know, but you can find parsing. Okay, another thing is you can find parsing systems on like the internet that you can test it out on, so you can see if it's parsing correctly. Yeah. I think projects highlight yourself like more. I obviously have better, I feel like I have better projects, especially as a student. If you don't have an internship, so in like this situation where you don't have an internship, you probably are going to want to highlight your projects more than you're going to want to highlight your experience. Because in this case, like experience is like lackluster, but as you keep going, I definitely am going to switch experience to the top. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So application season, it's going to come upon us. We'll talk about the fiscal year. I know some money, boring stuff, but the thing is that businesses work on expenses. And the thing is that they're more likely to hire at the beginning of the fiscal quarter than at the end, because at the end they're doing budgeting and they're not sure how much money they're going to have for the end of the next fiscal quarter. So they can only find out hires at the start. So for example, it's much easier if you look up online. Most of people who get laid off are in November, December at the end of the year versus January and February where most people get hired. This ties in to applications for CS because in August, September, when they're doing budgeting, they're dropping a bunch of applications and they're saying, oh, apply to our jobs. And then in October, November is when they're actually doing most of the interviews. And it's same thing over here where January, February, I guess in January, they're doing interviews. You apply in like November, December, and then you get actual interviews in January, February. Make sure you organize yourself. You can use a document to track your applications. I did this last year. I didn't do it this year. But I had like an Excel spreadsheet with like 200 companies, figuring out if I applied, what happened, the result, if I liked their interview process or not. You can use Simplify. You fill out a Workday form. It fills out a Workday form in literally 2 minutes. So easy. Makes your life so much easier. You can, for cover letters. So there's a big question about like, should you have a cover letter ready for each application? I'm personally on the team of you should have cover letters for a specific cover letter for jobs you really, really want. But for jobs that you don't care about or and they require a cover letter, just have one like copy pasted that you can switch out the title for and the job title and all that stuff for. Maybe you have one different for a front end, back end, or a full stack role. But yeah, I think only making specific cover letters for jobs you really want. But make sure you have one ready. So apply relentlessly. Do not, jobs are screwed right now. First off, UF Career Center. A lot of people don't know this, but they call a different API, djobsync.org. And I understand it says 409 for software engineer intern up there, 409 jobs. When I looked that up in like October, it had 10,000. And the thing is, like, UF Career Center, they don't get posted there. They get them from JobSync or direct employers. That's what it is. And don't just apply to FANG and quant. Diversify your applications. And even in the beginning of the year, I think it's quantity over quality. You want to make sure that you get as many applications out. And then like, so this is like the famous Pitt internship board. Every single year, if you look at how many stars goes up on it, every single one of these applications are gonna get 10K to 20K applications. It's not a bad thing. It's just, you got to know what your competition is going into it. There's hundreds of other job boards out there with smaller offers and smaller companies, but job boards like this one, they're good, but at the same time, they're a little bit. And then another cheat code is Google search operators. You can do like site Google greenhouse.io software intern. And then here it has a bunch of results of just, SpaceX, data bento, and there's a ton more results. I didn't scroll all the way down, but you can learn search operators and have it include certain terms and exclude others so that you know what you want and you can tailor to whatever you're looking for. And tons of things will come up, especially when we're peak application season, and make applying fun. I did 37 Lockheed Martin positions in 14 minutes. Don't do that. That was dumb. But because that'll just make you seem desperate. But do an application race against friends. Watch TV and apply. That's what Jonas recommends. Set goals like 5 applications a day. And doing that over 2 months is 300 applications. Okay, so you got an interview. So interview prep. Don't worry too much about it right now. Late September to mid-November or January to mid-April is when the majority of interviews happen. With behavioral interviews, you want to have the STAR method: situation, task, action, result. So for example, tell me about a time when your teammate wasn't pulling his/her weight and how you solved it. You could say, like, I first asked them privately if they were struggling with anything at home or if they were having trouble using what we were using. And they were like, that's the situation. And then it just happened to me that they didn't know React. Therefore, I decided to reassign to another teammate. That's the task. And then assign to other you can say, oh, I like to foster a positive environment where everyone feels heard and respected. That's the result. Yeah. And then here's a bunch of example of behavioral questions. Tell me a time about your solved a conflict. What is your biggest weakness? Have answers to these in your head. There's always going to be the same thing. They're going to just be in a little bit different iteration. Just be yourself and talk from the heart. They want to hire real people. And then another question is leak code or not to leak code. If you haven't taken DSA, and then you should do leak code. But a lot of people have already taken DSA. If you're going for some FANG internship, FANG or quant or hedge fund, you're going to want to be grinding leak code every single day. But the reality is a majority of people aren't going to be doing that. So when the application season, the interview season actually starts and you start getting these calls back from these companies, you can be like, hey, okay, I need to start grinding for the next 2 weeks. Leak code has a ton of just like 2-week learning plans. You should already, if you've taken DSA already, you should already know these things. And the biggest thing is consistency. I know Jonas can attest to that. Is like, you're the leak code. You grind it at one point, yeah. Say.
A good point to grind code be it already got there was some but have time to get it over. Because if you have no alternatives, you prioritize quant associated with here. But the best thing you can have on the resume get in an internship interview is a previous intern. So if you've done that, you can kind of slow down on personal projects a little bit and devote more time to like lead code prep. And once you've got that combination of good at lead code and you have an internship experience already, you can leverage both of those to maybe get to some of those bigger companies. But that's if you're like lucky enough to get an internship like after your sophomore year, which is really low.
Yeah. So another thing, like interview difficulty, small companies and non-tech companies, they're going to have the easiest ones. But then if you start going up, if you start climbing the ladder, you're going to have 3-4 interview rounds with big tech and quant funds, sometimes even more. The higher the prestige, the higher the difficulty. That's just going to be how it is. And you need to prepare for where you're going to fall on this graph and how much you want to prepare for it. Another one is hiring without whiteboards. These are companies that don't really use traditional hiring like CS trivia, like the leak code and stuff and the hacker rank. They want to make sure that you are like it's basically a giant list of each company and what they do. It's huge. It's like 200. How many entries was it? It's like 1,000 or something. It's like crazy, and it shows what each company does, and it's stuff that isn't so much the regular CS. So check that out. Another thing is tech communication, connections. It's one of the most important skills. Presenting yourself at career fair. These skills are all learned, and it takes time. Contact with past employers. If it's March and you don't have an internship yet, and you think that you have to call back your past employer, you did good at there. They're going to want to give you an offer, but you got to have the connection. This is an example of my LinkedIn. Don't do this. This is an example of bad LinkedIn. Actually, it's like exactly what I'm going to be saying. This obviously none of this is true. We're gonna move on. So for LinkedIn tips, add picture in a banner. Get skill badges for things you've endorsed and get endorsed for skills. For skills you have, of course. You can have a custom URL to fit your name. When you first make a LinkedIn, it just makes a giant number. You want to make sure that it has your actual name. There's the coveted 500 plus connections. All the LinkedIn grinders will have 500 plus, and because that's the point where it stops showing how many connections you have. I would say if you don't like LinkedIn, I don't think you should put it on your resume, especially if you have a bad LinkedIn. I, for example, with my LinkedIn, would not put my LinkedIn on. You don't need LinkedIn, but it is useful for reaching out to recruiters. I'm pretty sure it's like 60% of networking, or 60% of jobs are not from online, or from networking. I mean, not online. And then but it's also, it's a dual-edged sword because 77% of recruiters use LinkedIn. It's helpful for finding jobs that are fit to you. Just don't obsess over it. Most people still prefer a handshake over social media. So what do you do now? Classes, if you don't know what you're going to do over summer, you can always take classes. If you want to go to grad school, you probably will need a GPA above 3.0. Go do projects, go learn something and keep your brain moving. Put it on your resume. Make sure you can show about it. Technical development, that's always a skill you can learn. And then if you want to go do research, that's always hiring too. Make a new data structure. So don't be listening to me. Go get a job. It will work out. I'm sorry, the market is really bad. There is an amount of luck to this. Yes.
About doing projects, and I like to believe that a great way to give yourself more of an advantage, skill or not. So I'm asking, what are some like project ideas you really good? Maybe you can come up with that.
If I can come up anything, I think usually what I recommend is like solving a social problem. So like people are bad with like fun. Yeah. Yeah, if you can talk to a recruiter about it for 5 minutes and you're like really proud of it and they can tell, then it's like some tool that you're really proud and you learn something new. You're gonna be like, wow, you this, yeah. But also just keeping yourself doing something. It's just good. And then yeah, I definitely run into that. Oh no, you should have a LinkedIn. You should have a LinkedIn without a doubt. It takes like 2 seconds. And also it's like, but yeah, it's very easy. And having a LinkedIn, especially in like a question like that, you can have like a very shallow LinkedIn that just shows where you worked. Maybe one project. It doesn't have to be that deep. They know. Yeah. So yeah, I've done 600 jobs applied to 600. I had interviews and it is just a numbers game. There is an amount of luck to it and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So yeah. Do you want to go? What's up?
So do you believe that there is a sort of standard that when an internship falls below, no matter how desperate you are for an internship, you should not take that?
Yeah, I mean, like, but how low are you talking? Like, when I see,
Like, how bad does an internship have to be for you to just not take it, even if you are desperate?
I mean, you can just, yeah,
Some people might say if it's on bait, some people might say, if it's a bait and switch, so they say you're gonna be doing like software development, but then they end up having you do completely unrelated tasks and you're not really coding them much. But that's gonna be different for every person. You can also learn some like different skills at those kinds of jobs, but if it's not like ultimately the kind of work that you want to be doing in a long term, there's like, you will need to ask yourself like, hey, is it worth getting this on my resume, or would I be better kind of going off on my own and continuing to double down on projects?
it's just like, I wouldn't do an unpaid, but it depends on the company. But
And it depends on personal circumstances too, like, you know, some people have to support themselves, they can't afford to work for freelance. So, that factors in too.
yeah. It also, like, some people won't want to get paid a certain amount. It's a numbers game. Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah. I could see people who are like, an easy example is like people who do freelance work. And they think, oh, me taking this internship, me doing freelance work and just sitting in my room, middle of Miami or whatever, is I do more and I get paid more than whatever this intern is. Or even if they get paid more, it's just easier for them. But
Awesome. Cool. Let me split the recording here real quick.